All right, good evening. Welcome into the Touchdown NFL podcast. It's a happy Thomas Willoughby and a less happy Lee Wakefield here to bring you the week 2 NFL podcast from the Touchdown. The Falcons, how about it?
How about it, indeed? Didn't see it happening. I mean, loads of caveats with as ever. Jordan Love in his third game ever, minus Aaron Jones and Christian Watson and a bunch of players on defense. I mean, we have our own injuries to deal with as everyone does, but that seemed like it was a pretty harsh situation to be in. But it was almost the reverse of what you've come to expect from the modern day Atlanta Falcons, to be down multiple scores in the fourth quarter and to turn it around. Delighted. I was concerned. I think I mentioned it on the podcast last week, because I obviously didn't watch the game last week because I was doing other stuff. I was legitimately concerned. I don't believe in that sort of thing. Like, I can be a curse, for example. But I was concerned that there might be something like that. But I'm glad to have been proven not to be the issue, which is good. Tick me off that list. But yeah, no, 2-0. It's obviously, by the time this goes out, we will know one way or the other, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later on. But there's a chance at the end of this weekend that 3 teams in the NFC South are going to be on 2-0, like the powerhouse NFC South. Who saw that coming? Like, yeah, I'll enjoy it. Because we've still got. We're nowhere near the teams that we want to be up with, but for the time being, we're better than the Chiefs. We're better than, joke about it all I like. Yeah, that's where we're at. So, and who's going to stop us? Probably the Lions. But yeah,
it's a shame Tate's not here to dive in on that point. I'm sure he would have, but it feels like Atlanta's a fun team to watch at the minute, because as much as I don't know, I don't want to say there's no expectations, because I guess there is some, because obviously, you're not in the doldrums anymore. You are a couple of steps away from that. It's the sort of thing that, it's nice to see a team, probably from your point of view, support a team that's on an upward trajectory. And as much as, it won't be perfect, but, it's watching a fun team at the end of the day, with some fun young players and some very good young players as well, making their way. And, it's exciting for the future, I guess.
Yeah, we talked about the way that this team has been built before in the season preview podcast, and how it feels like it's been built backwards. Like Desmond Ridder will have a question mark over him, I think, until the final whistle of the season. Be that come the end of, I guess, first week in January now, or be that sort of later on down the line. But Drake London is, now that we found him, is really good. Kyle Pitts is. I think people are going to get really annoyed about what Kyle Pitts does this season, like they did last season, because he's supposed to be more than a tight end, but also he's doing what we want him to do, kind of thing. Bijan Robinson, I'm going to go off on him a bit later on in a different part, but I feel like I'm repeating myself. I was loath to the pick, but I very much enjoyed watching his performance yesterday.
Yeah, I bet.
And yeah, I mean, it's, again, we're going to play some good teams this year. I don't expect us to be one of those like 12, 13 win teams. But who knows what? I don't really know what ceiling is now. I mean, I didn't expect to be at this stage, so it's nice. It's nice, It's just nice. It's nice.
You sound a bit unnerved by how okay it's going.
We haven't had a winning record since 2017. Well, from last week. We started 2-0 that year. Again, we played the Lions in week 3 that year. We're doing that again. It's just I'm being thrown back to what was, in hindsight, a bit of a golden era, albeit with significantly less talented players. No, it's I want to enjoy it for what it is, but I also want to be a bit of an idiot about it, get caught up in it, and I can't. And it's just like I'm a bit all over the place about it. But it was lovely. It was really lovely. And I hope it continues. Ideally through to the end of next weekend. I don't want to see us lose in London again. We'll probably talk about that next week. But yeah, we're fine. We're fine. We're winning. That's all that matters, and it is quite fun. I have to say, there's going to be hiccups. I'm braced for that. But that's part of the course with the Falcons, I think. But right now we're a bit different. So yeah.
No, it's good. It's nice. It's nice to have some positivity because as a Chargers fan, I'm not really going to bring too much of that this week, or for maybe the foreseeable. Let's just say myself and Peter are penning this week's winners and losers, and the Chargers are featuring in the losers, which I've written. So I'm not going to go into a couple of minutes of Chargers debrief as you've just done with the Falcons. We'll be diving into our biggest takeaway really, really soon. But I wonder if we'll get some Falcons mentions in the copy that's coming out on the website. 5 wide, obviously, from yourself. Wins and losers, like I said, I'm not featuring any Falcons in the winners, but I'm sure we'll get some good things coming out. And like I say, over the next few weeks, I'm sure. And like I say, you've got something to talk about one of your players a little bit later on. But we'll follow the same format as last week. Let's dive into biggest takeaways and talking points of the weekend. We've got a couple of slightly different ones here. Obviously, Tabe's not with us this week, so it will be maybe a bit of a quicker pod. Maybe we'll go through some extra ones that we've got aside from the ones that we planned. But I'll kick off. With Joe Burrow's calf, which is a little bit of a talking point for not just this week, but also for the coming weeks as well. It's clearly limiting him, and it's hurting the Bengals a lot. And in that sense, also hurting my preseason predictions as well, which. Not only myself, but also a few guys here with us at the touchdown that we all had, well, not all, but quite a lot of us had the Bengals down to have a really good season. I was bullish on both the Ravens and the Bengals. This one was a really interesting game for myself and for my preseason takes really. But the offense just isn't operating in the same manner without him being able to step into throws, without he's clearly been bothered by it. And like I say, they're up for a big season. They're sort of all in with this. Obviously, they paid Burrow. With that comes the pressure of he needs to drag himself and his team to another Super Bowl and then potentially win it. But he just can't do it. And he's come out and he said himself, he's re-aggravated yesterday after the game, and it leaves the Bengals in a real big quandary, doesn't it? It really does, because what are they going to do? Do they sit him and kind of write off the next couple of games without him? Calf injuries are not fun either. They don't just clear up in a week or two a lot of the time. We don't know the severity of it. It hopefully isn't too as bad as it was in the preseason when he wasn't at training camp for a few days. They've got the Rams next week, and I talked about the Rams last week in the same segment. Talking about Sean McVay still being a genius play call without star players. Obviously, the Bengals have got a good defense. Lou Anarumo obviously is a well-revered defensive coordinator at this point and will probably be a head coach in the non-too-distant future. But, as much as the Rams didn't win last night against the 49ers, they look fun and they're going to cause the Bengals problems. And if they've not got the star quarterback, that's going to be chalking up another loss. And, we know, and it always comes up in week 2, doesn't it, about the playoff win percentages. If you go 0-2, it drops down severely from just 0-1. And then it's almost non-existent from 0-3. And that is fighting not only the record, but also history if the Bengals have to come back. And then, is Burrow's calf going to just tank the whole season for them almost? By the time it gets too late, they'll be too far back. I don't know. It is a huge talking point, like I say. And it's definitely something to keep an eye on, because this is not going away, I don't think. But it's also a massive, massive pivot point in the whole league season, I feel.
Yeah, it as always is the case when it comes to the league's star quarterback. So let's be fair, Joe Burrow has been one of the league star quarterbacks for the last, effectively since he came in. Whenever there's anything that's slightly troubling them, it becomes a significant issue. We've gone through countless postseasons where Patrick Mahomes slightly niggles his ankle, and all of a sudden it's, oh my God, the Chiefs are done, kind of thing. But this one, you're right. It feels a little bit different. I remember when the injury happened, because it happened in a joint practice with the Atlanta Falcons. It was a non-contact, him rolling out of the pocket and kind of pulling up, and nobody really knew at the time what it was. There was a little bit of discourse over whether it was a knee issue. People concerned that it was I'm trying to remember what the injury was in his rookie season. If it was a re-emergence of something like that. Obviously, muscle injuries in themselves have the ability to reoccur once you've received once you've had well, obviously in all injuries in general, but once you've had a muscle injury, it has it can sort of reoccur. So if he's feeling it, it's gonna it's gonna hurt, and obviously that's going to affect his ability to move. One of the things that he's really good at is getting out of the pocket or extending plays. One of the obviously it's going to affect his throw mechanics as well. I think the biggest problem for the Bengals is not necessarily the biggest problem for the Bengals. The biggest problem for me trying to talk about Bengals is I don't even know who their backup quarterback is. So if he is going to be out for X amount of time, I do not know who comes in. Do they pick somebody up? Do they sort of stick with whoever their two is at the moment? I don't know the answer to that. And you're right to bring up the statistics of, if you start 0-2, the chances of getting in are, it's kind of stacked against you. I do think those have leveled out a little bit since they moved into the 17-game season. Just gives you that extra, and the additional playoff spot as well probably helps. So I wouldn't say that the Bengals are sort of kind of done just yet, but no. One of the issues of being really good year to year is that you're going to play against really good teams also. Like on that number one schedule is never going to be easy. Yeah. So it's going to be they've got to manage it properly. I think if they get desperate and they feel like once you give a quarterback money, the onus is on to win. And you've got to win often, and you've got to win ultimately championships and get to the Super Bowls. But you can't let that cloud what you do. You can't let chasing that right now affect your ability to do that down the line. If you are seriously concerned about his injury at the moment and what that might mean for him for the rest of the season, don't play him, because there is every chance that you might aggravate it further, and then he might be out for the rest of the season, and then that might go into next season, and it might become a recurring thing. And just be careful. Like you've given a guy a lot of money, a significant amount of money for the next 5 years or so. Just make sure that you're being smart with that asset. Not for a second saying Bengals are going to write off the season, because I do think they've got good players, and I do think they should have the ability to be at the very least competitive. But Joe Burrow is a huge talent and a huge hole to fill if he's not there. I do not envy the people making the decisions moving forward. I think we'll probably find out in the next sort of couple of days just to what extent he is that they are concerned about him. If I'm being in that situation, I'm probably looking at the earliest week 4. But I'm not. I'm lucky enough to not be in that position. So yeah, you're right. It's going to be. I think this is going to be a conversation that we have possibly a couple of times this year, depending on whether or not the Bengals kind of turn it around, because wins speak the loudest. And if they start racking up some games and he's not necessarily playing to the level that we've seen him play, I think that question may go away somewhat. But if they're not, and he's still playing and it's not looking great, we'll be having a very different conversation about where they go for the rest of the season. Not to be too down in week 2, but yeah.
They've got a few things to consider, haven't they? Like you say, their backup is Jake Browning, who I believe has not played an NFL game. And I think he's the only quarterback on their roster. So that's obviously it's Joe Burrow. It's always going to be a pretty decent drop off, but that is a chasm, isn't it, between him and the backup? So are you going to win games, even with the Bengals roster, Bengals wide receivers, Bengals defense? Are you going to win games with Jake Browning? Probably not. So if you sit him, you're writing off games effectively. On the other hand, they've got until Monday. Obviously, it's a longer week. They're playing Monday Night Football against the Rams. Could you sit him for one game? And just give him 2 weeks, maybe? Because like I say, the Rams are going to be frisky anyway. Again, it's a non-conference opponent, so if it comes down to tiebreakers later down the line, you've not lost much because it's not a conference game. You're not losing head-to-head. risky. The Bengals bye week is at week 7, which is too long. You can't just write off 6 weeks of the season and say, we'll see you after the bye, because you'd need to go on an absolute, tear to make the playoffs. Even if you win one game out of the 6 that you played beforehand, you're not going to win 9 out of the last 10 games. So that's that's very, very tough. So it's a real well-balanced situation for how, like you say, how they're going to handle it. It's going to be something worth keeping an eye on. And it's also his play as well, because as you mentioned, like his mobility is like a big thing. He's not obviously like a Lamar Jackson kind of mobile quarterback, Jalen Hurts style mobile quarterback, but his escapability, much in the same way as Patrick Mahomes, is massive part of his game. And the interception that he threw against the Ravens was down to him not being able to step into the throw. I mean, he's not renowned for his arm strength as it is. It's probably a little bit better than it was in college, but he's still not renowned for it. And if he can't step into throws, then he's just going to leave some floaters over the middle like he did against the Ravens. And it's just going to lead to bad plays, isn't it? And it's just going to limit their explosiveness downfield as well. So it's a tough one. It's definitely one worth watching. I don't really know which way to go with it, which way they should go with it, but it's going to be one that's one to watch for sure on everyone's radar.
If they get the indication that it's something that is not a huge concern, but if it's not a huge concern, but they feel like he needs to at the very least rest it for 1 week, just do it without hesitation. You'd like you say, you'd much rather be 0-3 again. Not necessarily writing off the Rams, because we've seen prime time stories written for just random players. I forget the guy's name, but I think he was like the 4th string quarterback for the 49ers in maybe 2018 or something. And Thursday night against the Raiders, and he just blew up. He had like an excellent Madden Ultimate Team card that weekend or something. So it's like Browning could make a name for himself to the point where I recognize him. Not to disrespect Browning, but I'm sorry. You would much rather be in a situation where it's 0-3, but you know that Joe Burrow is going to be coming back, rather than playing him in that game, something happen, and then, like you say, get to the bye week and they're 1-6 or something. I think you need to win. Not saying that it's a write-off already, but I think you probably need to win 9 games in order to get to in the wild card in the AFC. I'd say there or thereabouts. Again, not to say they can't win their division, but yeah, 9 games is probably what we're looking at minimum to be in that conversation. And I don't know. I don't know. Make for great listening for the listener, just hearing me repeatedly go, I don't know. But yeah, it's gonna. I think we're probably going to be having another conversation about Joe Burrow in a few weeks' time, or maybe later in the season, depending on just how sort of severe things are looking.
I'd love to get producer Kieran's thoughts on this. Once he's put everything out, maybe even drop in a little 2-minute clip of yourself, because obviously Kieran, big Bengals fan, lives out in Cincinnati. Would love to hear his thoughts. Big Joe Burrow fan, being an LSU guy as well. So yeah, maybe we'll get to hear his thoughts on it. Maybe you can pen something for the website. I don't know. But yeah, we'll move on. And you've got something from the Vikings as your biggest take.
Yes. So they lost again. The Vikings, and it shouldn't necessarily be a surprise that they're losing games. They had obviously an excellent season last season. Was it 13-4? The maths is all over the place with this. They won a lot of games.
They won 13. You're right. Yeah.
Won the division, got to the playoffs, and lost. Sort of bounced, because that's just what the Vikings do. One of the sort of most interesting things about the Vikings last season was the way in which their season panned out. They are one of the worst 13-win teams of all time. In fact, the only 13-win team in history to have a negative points differential. They conceded more points than they scored, despite winning significantly more games than they lost. And a lot of that comes down to the amount of one-score games that they won. The problem with trying to project that season to season is one-score games in the NFL are often just a toss-up. It's one play here or there, and it's a bit of it's a rub of the green. It's a bit of luck that the Vikings just seem to have on their side all season, and it's not something that you can account for the next season unless you have made personnel or sort of coaching, structural changes to improve that. And now the Vikings are finding that out, having lost 2 games back to back by 1 score. That game on Thursday, against the Eagles was so sort of typical of what you're going to get from the Eagles this season, because Kirk Cousins is a pretty good quarterback. Like, he gets a lot of, I mean, he's a bit of a meme because he's just like, he's seen as just fine, but he's not just fine because he's had a long career as an NFL star. You don't get that sort of career if you're not like good. And he's throwing up the ball to Justin Jefferson, who's incredible. And they're putting up ridiculous yardage, sort of points and yardage totals, and it's incredible. And they're losing because they're not built to win those games consistently. They were last season lucky enough, or had a bit of momentum in order to do so, but they're not. It's not something that's transferable year to year. The fumbles that Alexander Mattison had on Thursday are not an indication of him as a player, I don't think. I just think he had a good season last year because the Vikings were on a bit of a roll, and the Vikings are not going to be on a roll this year. I feel very, very strongly about this year. I think Kirk Cousins is going to have one of the all-time losing seasons that we've seen from a quarterback in a long time. Again, just to always bring it back round to the Atlanta Falcons. I remember in 2018, we went 7-9. We were pretty poor for the majority of the season. And Matt Ryan had a season in which he eclipsed his MVP year for yards and touchdowns and interception. He had one of the all-time great bad seasons. And I think Kirk Cousins is going to have that sort of year. Again, they can turn it around. They've got good players. I'm not saying that this is them kind of, it's the writing's on the wall at 0-2, because you can get into the playoffs on a losing record, but I don't think the wins are going to come for them as not easily. In hindsight, a lot of it's going to we're going to look back on that season and go, how did they win all those games? And I think we're going to come to look back at this season in a few years and go, how did they lose all of those games? I think there's going to be loads of weird losses that you can't really explain, other than the Vikings are a weird team. There's a really good. I highly recommend it if you've got a full day free. There's a 7-part documentary series by Secret Base, who's a SB Nation YouTube channel, about the history of the Minnesota Vikings, and they are amazing. The highest win record for a team that has not won a Super Bowl. They're got the 3rd best win record in NFL history. It's incredible. This is just who the Vikings are. We're going to look back on this season, I think, as, yeah, like I say, how did they had all those players and they scored all those points and it was all for nothing, all of those empty yards kind of thing. I don't know what you I don't know if I'm being too hasty with it and sort of saying that I've seen it now 2 weeks in a row, and this is just who the Vikings are going to be, because I'm trying not to I'm trying not to write teams off in September, but I don't know if this is coming across to anyone else. Well, to yourself, who are the Vikings this year? Who are they, kind of thing?
No, I think it was always on the cards, wasn't it? Because they were so fortunate to win a lot of those games, those 1-score games, as you mentioned. And then there's always going to be a case of regression to the mean, because it's like being able to flip a coin and get 10 heads in a row, for example. That's what they kind of did last year, in a way. And then to come back and say, oh, okay, I'm going to do that again. I'm going to flip 10 heads in a row. It's not going to happen. So it's kind of like that, isn't it? It's the regression to mean. It's just maths at the end of the day. They have players like Justin Jefferson, for example, who make that easier because they tip those one play, those things, those plays that the balance of the game hangs on. If you have a play like that, then he can kind of make that 50-50 ball, a 75-25 ball. And that's kind of one of the reasons why they were able to get out of those, because they got some good players such as Justin Jefferson, not just him, but they've got players like him who can tip that balance. But it doesn't work all the time. Again, it's maybe you didn't throw 10 heads in a row or flip 10 heads in a row. Maybe you got to 7, but that's not good enough. You know what I mean? And sometimes that is good enough. I don't know if I'm stretching this flipping coins metaphor a bit too far now, to be honest with you, but you kind of see what I'm saying. I think you're right. It's a regression to the mean. And I think that was on the cards from a lot of fans and a lot of analysts around, the national scene in America. This season, I think they are just that team again, but the ball's just rolling the other way. Now, what have we got coming up in week 3? We've got a game between the two teams who have this look. We've got the Vikings playing the Chargers in Minnesota. It's kind of that thing that we talked about last week with Taib. It's those two things that go together in the universe, where the universe doesn't know which way to go because it has two things of the same. We're going to see some weird stuff, I think, on Sunday. But it's a hugely pivotal game for both teams because neither team will want to go to 0-3. Neither team can really afford to go to 0-3. So yeah, it's going to be a massive game. They aren't going to continue on this spiral. I don't think the Vikings, because they've got a good enough team. Like you say, I think you bang on with Kirk Cousins. He's more than average. Like, I think it's unkind, and like you say, I think it's just become cool to say that in a way because he is a good quarterback. He is good. He's got a lower ceiling than a lot of good quarterbacks. Like, he's probably a tier 3, tier 4 quarterback. Whether you put Mahomes in one on his own or not, kind of depends on whether he's 3 or 4 to me. But he's good. And he played well on Sunday. He threw for a lot of yards, and sorry, not Sunday, on Thursday he threw for a lot of yards, and I guess against a good defense. So Kirk will have good games. Justin Jefferson will probably. I've been joking with my Chargers supporting friends that he will have about 400 yards receiving on this Chargers defense on Sunday next week. So we'll kind of look forward to that one, I guess. It's a pivotal one for the Vikings, and they need to kind of equal themselves out and kind of go back to where they were last year and kind of find a way to get the ball and the rub of the green going in their favor again.
Yeah, like winning lots of games by less than a touchdown is not a sustainable way of winning lots of games over multiple seasons. Like, it's something that you can do. You look at I'm trying to the San Francisco 49ers won as many games as anyone over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, and the way they do that is they are able to grind out games where necessary, but they can also blow doors off teams when they want to. That game and we'll probably that game on Sunday against the Rams was quite fun, back and forth kind of thing. But then when push came to shove, the 49ers never really looked like losing it, and I never get that impression with the Minnesota Vikings, or certainly didn't last season. And it'd be difficult for me to have that impression of them again, sort of this season. But it doesn't feel like they made many improvements in the off season. It doesn't feel like the necessary changes that they needed to make in order to become a sustainable 13-win team sort of took place. If anything, they took players away. But yeah, that's my takeaway, is that the Vikings are probably going to lose more games than they win, and they're going to be one of the great teams in doing so. A positive point differential for a losing. That's where I'm going. Hot take. Positive point differential for a losing record. It's happening.
That would be funny. That would actually be quite funny. I'm sure there's plenty of takeaways. If you've got your own takeaway, a big takeaway from the weekend, or a big talking point for the weekend, bob it in the comments. And we'll maybe get to it next weekend, or we'll give some inspiration for Ryan Knight on the website. So yeah, like I say, interact with us. Let us know what you think. We'll move on then to our games of the week. I'll let you go first on this one because I went first in the previous segment. So you've got the Commandos at Broncos, which was an absolute barn burner by the looks of the score.
Yes, yeah. So my routine is watch the Falcons at 6, and then for Red Zone afterwards. I haven't got the attention span to do Red Zone and a game at the same time. So that's just the way I do things. And this was one of the sort of the later kickoffs. Commanders, I think, are an interesting team. I don't really care for them. I've got no beef with the Broncos. A strong dislike for Sean Payton. So any misery that he has experienced professionally, I'm all for. But I've got no real beef with the command either of these teams. But I find their situation sort of really interesting because they're not too dissimilar to ourselves in that they spent all the off season putting things in place for Sam Howell to become their starting quarterback. The big really the thing that I want to talk about is bringing in Eric Bieniemy as their offensive coordinator, who obviously spent the last, I want to say 3 years, 4 years, as the Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator, doing. I mean the Chiefs' offense speaks for itself, but he has been up for head coaching jobs that he hasn't got in that time. And there's been a lot of question marks as to why. Obviously, lots of very legitimate arguments in every camp, but it would appear the stock answer is he's not the one running the Chiefs' offense. So he's come to the Commanders really to set himself apart, to say, that's what's going on over there. Fair play. I can do this with this offense. And what we saw was a team go down quite big early on. Broncos looked really sharp offensively. Russell Wilson was making some throws that we've not seen from him for a while as a quarterback. Again, I feel like it's forgotten just how good a quarterback he can be, because he was bad last season. The Broncos were bad last season. The head coach was bad last season. Loads of things conspired for him to be in that situation, and he's probably going to be better this year. But man, the Commanders, they sort of rallied, and Denver's a tough place to go. Altitude, sound. Again, too early for me to be talking about the climate, but it's probably colder. And for a guy starting his third game, making some of the throws that he made, Sam Howell looked really, really comfortable. There was some rookie type sort of mishaps. He was running into a couple of sacks, and as he tried to escape consistent pressure. But the most impressive thing was for me was how Bieniemy was. He figured out that Broncos defense. Not a vintage Broncos defense by any means, but he figured it out, and he put his quarterback in a situation to succeed. And Sam Howell had a really good day, and I was incredibly impressed by some of the poise and the touch on his throws. There was one, I think it might have been a touchdown. That I'm spoiler. I'm going to write about this, but some of the throws that he was making, you look at and go, man, this guy was a mid-round pick, and how much of it is him? How much of it is Eric Bieniemy? Were the organizations that were hiring other than him correct in their assertion that he was not capable of translating that sort of offense? Again, it's early days. It's week 2. I'm trying not to get too far ahead of myself with this sort of thing. But through 2 weeks, they're 2-0. Offense looks really good. It seems to me like the Commanders fans have taken to Bieniemy somewhat. I've seen a bit of discontent towards the general coaching kind of setup. So it'll be an interesting look in the summer if it does transpire that he is going to be a head coach somewhere else. But yeah, that game was. We had the end. The ending. The Hail Mary tips twice in for a touchdown. Got to go for 2 to tie it up. Missed. I'd switched off. I've got to learn to not do this, because I've been watching this sport long enough to know that it's never over really till it's over. I was like, it's 20 to 1. I'm going to go to bed. Just check my phone, and then this group chat's going wild. Flick on the Game Pass. It's like, I've missed it. Let's see if someone's put some highlights up. Just a really fun game. And I don't know if this is, again, me having forgotten about the sport for a summer and then coming back to it, but it seems to me like there are lots of close, fun, comeback type games through the first 2 weeks. Again, don't know how that translates for the rest of the season, but this one was the pick for me. I know there were a couple more throughout the weekend, but it's still a lot of fun. Really excited to see what the Commanders do this year, because that's a tough division they're in. Kind of written off early on. They're in a pretty good position. So yeah, I enjoyed that one. I've got a lot of time for what's going on over there at the moment.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation, like you say, with Bieniemy. Like you say, going there to answer his critics, like you say, it's an interesting question, because I always feel like Ron Rivera's not there for a long time. So it would be stupid of the Commanders to have this non-long-time head coach in terms of for their franchise, and then not give it to Bieniemy. If they got rid of him, it would be stupid of them to almost like give him the opportunity, then let him go and flourish elsewhere as well. So that's definitely one to watch. My point for this game, I think, was actually the Washington defensive line in particular having a great day against the Broncos offensive line. 7 sacks, and all their big players on that defensive line came to play. Even Chase Young coming back, getting a sack and a half. Montez Sweat, absolute star, sack and a half. Deron Payne, another sack. This is what they need from their defensive front. This is what they've built their defense around. Really, their team identity is. As soon as you think of the Commanders, you don't think of the quarterback like a lot of teams. You think of their defensive line. So having this defensive line kind of show out like this is a massive thing. Move it a little bit further back. And you could say even Emmanuel Forbes as well. No, he's not part of the defensive line, but getting a pick, that's exactly what he's been brought to Washington to do. That's why they drafted him in the middle of the first round. He was a pick machine in college. That's what he's there to do. And he's got his first one. He should have had one last week against Arizona, one in and out of his hands. Could have had another. That would have made 2 in 2. My kind of question, though, you sound like you're quite positive about the Commanders. 2-0 obviously is a positive record, especially in that division. They've played the Cardinals and the Broncos. Can we kind of crown them as like for real yet with those opponents behind them, as much as they are, wins on the board?
No, I don't think so. I think that's a very valid sort of point to make. I mean, we saw who the Cardinals are sort of this week. Just as a total aside, I don't think it could have gone any better for the Cardinals.
No,
on
exactly.
Sunday,
I was thinking exactly that. Yeah,
they are built to lose, but they got up big, and they gave. I mean, they made the Giants look silly for a bit, which I guess if you're trying to lose as many games as you can, then that's probably where you want to be. By the by, I think the Broncos are not a team that is built to lose. They are very much built to try and win as many games as they possibly can right now. And they have aspirations higher than replacing their quarterback. And again, I know this is not the Broncos of 8 years ago. This is not the vaunted defense. This is a totally different sort of team that they've got here. But then it's not an easy place to go. I'm old enough to remember the conversations from a couple of years ago where it was, man, if they just had a quarterback, they would be something. They're figuring it out is where I go with it. Huge opportunity for them this week. I mean, in terms of like making a statement this weekend, Buffalo Bills. Like, if the Commanders can come from this without seriously embarrassing themselves, we might have a team that is in that conversation for bottom end of the I don't know. I think it's much too early to be crowning them as anything more than a team that's quite interesting at the moment. But yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm more excited. I'm more interested to see where the Commanders are in 3 or 4 weeks than I am the Broncos. Personal preferences to coaching staff aside, but I'm most interested to see, because they're an unknown. I think that's if we're gonna call them anything, what we know about the Commanders is we don't know anything about the Commanders. Is where I'm going with it. Yeah,
it's always interesting. I feel to see the teams with new quarterbacks, right? Especially the young quarterbacks who they're just rolling the dice on Sam Howell, and if it goes well, then amazing. It's great for them. It's always interesting to see that journey, and a lot of the time it doesn't work out, even with highly drafted quarterbacks. But it's even more interesting, I feel, with like a mid-round quarterback, especially one like Sam Howell, who probably should have got drafted a little bit higher than he was. So I think it's interesting. He's obviously playing well. He was interested in playing in college, a player that I liked watching at North Carolina. So, like I say, if he makes something of it, if the enemy makes something of him, then kudos to them, and they will both go on to bigger and better things. For the Commanders or not, I don't know, but. Yeah, it's interesting. Like you say, it's an interesting team. It's an interesting setup that they've got. And, if they can keep it rolling, then they'll become even more interesting as it goes on. So, yeah, I completely agree. And, let's just handle the Broncos for a bit. I don't mind. Let's go all in. There isn't much joy coming from here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what to say about the Broncos. This feels like the last decision. Sean Payton is an excellent coach, and he's got a lot of career. He's got a lot of pedigree. Blah 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 blah. But this feels like the last desperate attempt at a regime before it realizes that it's time to start again. If it doesn't work out this year, Wilson's not going to be there next year. I don't know if Sean Payton's going to have the patience to go through a rebuild, having spent X amount of years perpetually rebuilding a Saints strapped for cash. This is not necessarily all or nothing, but this is certainly playoffs or nothing. Or we will see them doing something completely different for the next couple of years. How's that for another hot take?
I think I said this to you. I can't remember if I said this on our preview podcast. I think that Payton's got enough power in the building that he'll stick around, get another quarterback, and he'll demand that they trade for someone or something like that. I don't know. I think he'll quite happily kiss goodbye to Russell Wilson at the end of the season. Just be, I'll do this myself then, or I'll get someone else. I think they'll find a way, but they'll build it up. But yeah, I think happy for the Broncos to be 0-2 alongside the Chargers, admittedly. But yeah, I'd like to see Sean Payton fail as well, especially because there was a lot of Chargers fans clamoring for Sean Payton to become the head coach of the Chargers, which I didn't really agree with. So if that makes that take look better from me, then all the better. But anyway, it's not about furthering ourselves on this podcast. So
you're on the right side of history, I'm afraid. There, you're completely right side of history, Nelly.
We'll move into bashing another AFC West team with my game of the week. My game of the week is the Bills, actually, which someone you mentioned a moment ago, who came up trumps against the Raiders, winning out 38-10. Now, obviously, this isn't a game of the week from just that score, because that isn't that remarkable, really, in terms of the Bills beating the Raiders. It's a good team, a tier 1 team, as I've called them in the past, in the AFC, versus a team who's very much not on the up and coming. But I think this was a really important game from Josh Allen's perspective. Josh Allen was spoke about a lot last week in the fact that he almost played with his hair on fire when he didn't really need to in their week 1 game. Obviously, the Bills lost that game. They came back with the win with this one. And in another sort of week where the other tier 1 teams, being the Bengals and the Chiefs, kind of looks a little bit rough around the edges. Obviously, the Bengals lost, as we kind of mentioned before. The Chiefs with a narrow win, not looking great against the Jags. But the Bills hung a resounding win on the Raiders, and that just brings a bit of calm and a bit of normality to their season. It kind of means that they can put it down to being a blip last week and they can kind of move forward. That isn't only just with the score either, that's with Josh Allen as well. Josh Allen was 31 for 37, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, looked calm, a touch under 275 yards as well. This was dominant. This is really dominant. James Cook was also dominant on the ground. Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs, Dalton Kincaid got a few targets as well. This was almost like a routine win that just makes every fan at the end of the day, when they're going to bed or chilling out after the game, just go, wasn't that nice? Actually, that was a nice win where you just think, I can relax throughout this whole game. It doesn't have nothing to either of our teams, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
But this was one I can kind of put myself in the shoes of the Bills fans and think, well, that was back to normal. That's what we should do. We need to beat the teams that we should beat and beat them well. Because we're hopefully the class of the AFC. Hopefully, going for a Super Bowl at the end of the day. So this is why, for the narrative around the Bills, I think this was a massive, massive game, and especially, like I say, with the wider narrative around the AFC, that really we're hoping for the Queen to rise to the top eventually. And hopefully the Bills, for their sake, this is them doing it, in week 2. And they can go on against the Commanders. As much as, we just talked about the Commanders being interesting, they can do this again next week from their point of view. And they can beat the Commanders. And then it's like, oh, so that's 2 wins that we should have got. We can just put down the first week to a blip. People weren't playing in preseason, all that sort of stuff. And then we can go on and we can get a little bit of a run going. That's kind of the way I see this for the Bills. This is kind of like this first step into their season, where they're going to be, like I say, hopefully from their point of view, going on and competing for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much the sort of win that we've come to expect of Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, like you say. And again, I've been trying to make a thing of preseason week 4, but like there were some exceptional circumstances around that first week loss against the Jets. Obviously, the Aaron Rodgers of it all, which didn't necessarily transpire, but that it seemed like the Jets sort of crowd was very much in. I mean, Josh Allen was kind of all over the place as well. This was much more of what we've come to come to know Josh Allen to be, especially over the last sort of few years. And I can't remember who it was that said it, but I did see something to the effect of some. It's going to annoy me, so I'm going to find out who said this and then try and send it. Somebody said that Josh Allen has not been the same since Brian Daboll left for New York, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I do think he had a huge impact on his career, but this felt like Josh Allen. Like this is Madden athlete Josh Allen. I think from my perspective, it raises serious questions over who. Speaking of who teams are, who are the Raiders? I don't know what they did in the offseason. I looked at every move that they made in the offseason, and I don't know the reason for it. I mean, financial reasons, I suspect, behind moving Derek Carr and replacing him with a more handsome Derek Carr. They were very much, I feel, hoping to lure Tom Brady in for one run in Vegas, which clearly it doesn't appear to have been sort of close ever. So they just went, well, let's get the next best thing. The guy that sort of held his helmet for a couple of times in preseason. Jimmy Garoppolo's fine. He's a good quarterback. I've never been overly enamored with him. I've got a huge 49ers mate who head over heels for Jimmy Garoppolo even last season, and I'm just consistently I don't get it. But
hey, I've got one for you. Just going back to earlier, sorry to butt in, but I've got one for you. Jimmy Garoppolo is what people say Kirk Cousins is.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I can roll with that, because Jimmy Garoppolo. The reason I suspect that comparison is never really sort of made is Garoppolo's kind of got a bit of hardware to back it up. Obviously, off the back of Tom Brady, whereas Kirk Cousins has not got that. That's a really good shout. I can see the lure of Jimmy Garoppolo. He is a safe quarterback. He's not going to be the reason you lose games, but he's not going to be the reason you win games. But you had that with Derek Carr, and then decided to give him way too much money. I don't know what the Raiders are this year. I don't know if they are going to be better than last year. I don't know if they're going to be what they were a couple of years ago, which was a borderline. I mean, they were a playoff team. By every word, they were a playoff team. They got there. Good for them. I don't necessarily think that's what they're looking at this year, and I don't really know what the plan is kind of moving forward. If they do have another losing season, do they change everything up again? It seems like you put a lot of eggs into the McDaniels basket. I don't know. I don't know who they are. And this win further muddies that. This loss rather further muddies that, because they won last week. Not necessarily convincingly, but they won last week. Was that a preseason? Was that a blip? I don't know. This is the wrong place to be asked. I need to think about it. Really good win for the Bills. And I think that they are probably going to win next week. And I think we're probably going to be over worrying about them. I think it's concerning. I think this is a concerning performance and result for who the Raiders are long term. Well, certainly over the course of this season. You watch them go and win next week and completely turn what I've said around. That would be really funny, actually. But yeah, that was my read on it. I know who the Bills are. This is who the Bills are. I don't know who the Raiders are. This feels closer to who I thought they were than we've seen before.
Yeah, I don't think the Raiders are going to be very good. I think they're heading for change. I don't think Josh McDaniels long for that job. They've got the Steelers next week on Sunday Night Football, so I can't see them winning that one. It's just going to be a massive coaching mismatch, I think, with that one. And like I say, Jimmy Garoppolo is just not great. Like I say, he is the average quarterback, I think. And that doesn't get you very, very far in today's NFL. I don't think, when you've got, especially in the AFC, when you've got all these quarterbacks in there, I just don't think it gets you very far at all. So yeah, bit of a mismatch on the scores as well. But like I say, for the kind of narrative around both teams, I think this was kind of a big one. especially around Josh Allen. Especially when people are talking about quarterbacks now, aren't they? Talking about all the top quarterbacks struggling, especially in the AFC. Burrow, people talking about Herbert being 0-2. Lamar's not throwing for loads of yards. People are kind of wanting something to talk about, and they want to throw Josh Allen into that, and don't think they can after a 38-10 win. I think that's kind of put a lot of people to bed a little bit on that one. So let's move on into Meme and Gif It. So this is where we either create a new meme, which I can tell that you're really excited about yours as well. And having read on our sheet, I can see why. Or we relate a meme to something that's gone on. I will get mine out of the way because mine's very simple. Something it's something that I'm going to talk about in Winners and Losers when that comes out tomorrow, when this podcast comes out as well. So if you're watching this, then go over to Touchdown, read our Winners and Losers that myself and Peter have penned for you. The Chargers are not good. So, especially the defense as well. The defense in particular. The offense is fine. It's good, actually. It's in the top 10 for both run and pass success rate, which is something I found out through writing that article. Shout out to Jack Brentnell, who alerted me to that on Monday. But I want to resurrect the Simpsons kill it with fire meme because that's what I want to do to the defense. It just needs to restart. I'm really on the verge of being Staley out at this point because he's supposed to be a defensive guru and it's just not working at all. This is probably a whole podcast section on its own without me getting into this. It's supposed to be quite a light-hearted segment that we're doing. So yeah, let's just kill it all with fire. Let's move on to the game next week against the Vikings, where the universe is going to throw up all sorts of weird shit. And let's see what nonsense I can be mad about next week.
It really is I've seen some possibly the Falcoholic or something like that referred to supporting the Atlanta Falcons as being on a roller coaster with a terrible safety record, and I feel like you're very much in the same boat.
Yeah, for sure.
I saw a clip. I think it was just a GIF actually of Justin Herbert in pre-snap. Sort of action in sort of that.
It was something like that. Yeah, it was really odd. I don't understand what it was.
What is Justin? And he's probably saying something like, "I'm in shotgun" or something like that. But the top reply was, "No, that's a threat to Brandon Staley." So yeah, it's you've got a really good team. I'm sorry that it's not come together. There's still time. It's not over yet.
Collection of individuals. That's the problem. I think. Anyway, more positive notes from yourself.
Get on to this nonsense. I giggled so much when I came up with this yesterday. My partner was sat in the chair next to me, and she just kind of I tweeted it, and she looked at her phone, and sort of went like slammed it down, walked out. So this is where I'm at with my. I think Bijan Robinson is really, really good. I don't really think that his nickname. I don't think that his nickname. Well, it's not really a nickname. I don't really know what they're doing at the moment. He's developing a brand around Dijon mustard. He's got his own line of Dijon mustard, which I'd love to ask him about because I don't know if that's ever going to be a possibility. I don't like mustard that much as somebody with a very delicate palate. I do like roast dinners though, and I do like to have quite a lot of gravy on my roast dinner. So I've decided that Bijan Robinson is now going to become a Bisto Robinson because that man is different gravy. That's such a stupid pun. And if I had any photoshopping skills at all, I'd make something of that, but I don't. So I've got to push it on here, and I've got to push it. I'm sorry, you've got to read all of these words that I'm saying now. I've got to push it in that, and I've got to make this a thing so that when it gets to next Sunday and he scores a touchdown at Wembley Stadium, get the whole end going, a Bisto. That
would be so British as well.
Let's go with that. Let's go with Bisto Robinson. I think I just think he's good. I think he's a good player. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him.
Fortunately, we've got a producer who does have some Photoshop skills that should be able to do that. If not, he'll drop in your tweet, which I read. I didn't see that yesterday, so I've just gone in to your Twitter and had a look at that. But this is exactly what this segment's for. So yeah, I'm really glad that you came up with that.
It was that, or I was trying to find. I completely forgot about Bicester as a brand. I was trying to find a way to make Bovril work. That didn't. I was struggling, and then it clicked.
Yeah, that
And it's
didn't work at all.
yeah, but we're there now. Let's hope that we can do this on a regular basis.
Absolutely. Let's get it rolling. Let's get Bisto Robinson. Let's get it rolling.
Hashtag Bisto Robinson.
Yeah,
Ahead of Wembley. Yeah.
It'll surely take off. Absolutely. So yeah, no, there's our memes and gifts this week, which is excellent. Really enjoyed that. Definitely a contrast to my one, which is great. We've made it all the sweeter. And let's wrap up then with our Monday night predictions. So review from last week. Obviously, Taib not here to defend himself. He got a point for the Jets. Myself and Taib both went for the Jets winning. He went for Dalvin Cook to have 100 yards, and he had 13 carries for 33 yards, so quite a way off there. And obviously mine was scuppered for 4 plays into the game as I went for the Jets winning and Garrett Wilson to have 10 plus catches. He had 5. So yeah, Aaron Rodgers, thanks very much for that. So big
it's not his fault.
Some dynamic stretching beforehand maybe might have sorted that out. I don't know. You unfortunately have got 0 points because you went for the Bills and Rodgers to have 2 INTs. So again, he fucked you over there as well by snapping his teeth. So moving on then, obviously it's not too exciting with the league table being exactly that. Obviously this will get a bit more thrilling as the season moves on and we have more points to accumulate. Hit us up with your prediction. Obviously we've got 2 Monday Night Football games this week, which is weird to say the least, thanks to that NFL. We've got the Saints visiting the Panthers and the Browns, the Steelers. I said that we can just pick whatever we want. I'm not going to be totalitarian about it. So go for it.
Can I just say, before we get into this, who decided that Panthers Saints on a Monday night in week 2 of this season was a game worthy of prime time? Like there was no reality where Bryce Young's quite exciting, but this is not a prime time fixture. I don't know what this is. Is it just to get them out of the way? I know there are teams out there that don't have a Monday night fixture. I want to know who made this decision and why. End of that.
I actually think it'd be a bit of a weak selection if it was like the 6 p.m. game on Sky. I'd be like, what's that all about? Never mind on a Monday night football.
You've got like 2 storylines, which is Bryce Young any good? We don't know yet because he's 2 games into his career. And Panthers and Saints kind of don't like each other. It's like, yeah, but also there are other rivalries in the division. It's like this is the weirdest. Anyway, I've gone for the other game, which is I've gone for the Browns to beat the Steelers 21-13. I am remaining stout in my bullishness on the Steelers. I think they are going to be fine this year, and I will also say that I do not think the Browns are going to be a playoff team. They are going to start 2-0 according to my predictions, but I do not think that they are going to be a playoff team. I think they're going to sort of fall away. However, Browns 21-13. Kenny Pickett, I don't know. Well, yeah, 2 interceptions is what I've got. Can you pick it? Is the question he asks all the time, and the defenses always answer yes. I know this isn't the segment for asking the questions, but I don't know if he's good or not. I don't really know. I don't know a lot. We're coming away from the 3rd podcast of the season. I don't know anything. I don't know. I think he's quite good. And I also think some of the players that he's throwing to are quite good, but he also looks quite uncomfortable. And some of his throws look really amateurish is the wrong word, but certainly low tier. It's a weird thing. I think if I firmly believe they're going to get into a rhythm and a role, and I think he's probably going to be fine. But at this moment in time, we're still quite early in his career. This might be, again, divisional rivalry. Teams don't like each other. I think the Browns might do it, and I think Pickett might have some questions to ask going into week 3. That's where I'm going.
I haven't gone for this game. I've gone for the Panthers Saints game, but I think the Browns will take this one as well. I'll go with the same way as you. Pickett does have some questions to answer. He's been talked to quite a lot in training camp, hasn't he, and things like that. And then obviously a bit of a damp squib last week. Obviously, the 49ers are the 49ers. They're a much better team than the Steelers are. But like I say, it's time to answer the questions, isn't it? Especially in these divisional games. So yeah, it's going to be big questions asked if you your predictions come true this week. I've gone the other way. I've gone for the Saints and the Panthers. I think the Saints will come out on top. I think it's kind of contradictory because I think that the Panthers will win the division. Although I am tempering those expectations a little bit after the Falcons beat them last week, fairly convincingly in the end. After a bit of an arm wrestle, you looked so pleased when I said that. Then, after it was pretty even in the first half, and then the Falcons just kind of like edged away, didn't they? I'm going to go for the Saints to beat them in Carolina, which is controversial considering my previous prediction. However, my other prediction, my wild prediction, is that Brian Burns has 3 sacks because he just played like a man possessed last week, and was causing all sorts of problems for the Falcons' defensive line. And I think the Saints have got a few injury problems on there, so I think he could eat tonight with 3 sacks, like I say.
I really like Brian Burns as a player. I was really hoping that he was going to understand the benefit of holding out last week. I think that would have made sent a much stronger message than holding in or whatever he did. But I really like him, and I think he's somebody that the Panthers can build a defensive line around. And I do like that as a pick. I don't know. The Saints are a weird team for me because I don't like them, as you might expect. But I also don't think there are there are certain teams where you can look at and go, I don't like them, but I can see why people like them. I'm sure you're in the same situation with, this is a really extremely poor example, but you're probably in the same the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, I don't like them, but I can see why everyone likes them because they always win. But like for whatever reason, the Saints have this reputation within they seem to have a bit of a reputation of being more of a winner than they are. And I don't know if that's recency bias. I don't know if that's just how the way that the division has been for X amount. I mean, they're one of the few teams to have won it in multiple seasons in a row. But they have I've talked to people about where they think this division's going next season, and I've spoken to enough people who have gone, it's the Saints. They're the team that have the most carryover from last season. They should be fine in a weak division, and it's like, why? I don't think they're great, and they probably do win, and they probably do start 2-0. And 2-0, 3 teams in 2-0 in the NFC South. As I said, it's people are talking. There are 3 teams going to the playoffs from this division. It's not a game that I'm going to watch because I haven't got a day off tomorrow. So, but yeah, I like the pick, and I'll probably go Saints as well. And I'll probably go for a similar sort of scoreline. I suspect it will be not necessarily last drive, but certainly going into the fourth quarter, sort of fairly close. But then once the Saints kind of pull away, I don't know if the Panthers have it in them to pull it back.
I think there's a contrast in this game, isn't there, with the Panthers being so young and the Saints being so experienced, and maybe it's part of that that's kind of just pushing me towards them a little bit because, as much as I'm a big Bryce Young guy, there was something missing, I think, last week. And then, as much as Derek Carr isn't all that, he's going to have a bit of know-how, I think, to get through this game.
Yeah.
If Brian Burns isn't sacking him every 5 minutes, but yeah.
Well, I talked about Kirk Cousins, and you don't have that long a career in the NFL if you don't have something. Derek Carr's had a pretty long career in the NFL, and he's he's made a load of money for somebody who is fine. I have to say I do have a little bit of a soft spot for him because I remember the team that he started with, the Raiders. That was a team that hadn't won for I'm pretty certain it was a full stretch of a season over 2 years that they hadn't won before he sort of came in and things started to turn around a bit. So I have a base level of appreciation for Derek Carr, and I think he's better than people probably give him credit for. But is that enough to elevate an entire team that wasn't necessarily great last year. This isn't the podcast to be talking about the Saints, but I don't know what they look like for the rest of the year. But they probably win this one, and then they probably get bumped up a little bit in terms of the media expectation because they're 2-0 and they are a little bit stable.
I could go along with that. Check back with us next week. Obviously, by the time you listen to this, you'll already know how right or wrong we are. But that does us pretty much for another week. Let's close out by just kind of giving you a little bit of a heads up for what is coming this week on the Touchdown. As I've mentioned a couple of times, we've got the weekly winners and losers from myself and Peter. That'll be out by the time this podcast is out. Willow will be bringing us his 5-wide article come Wednesday. In the middle of the week as well, we're going to have the week 2 All-Stars from Reese. We're going to have some betting picks, and then we're going to have some under and overreactions from Stephen. Then moving into the weekend, we'll have some more prop bets. We'll have some more man-on-man matchups, and we'll also have some rookie watch. I'm also going to drop another plays I like video over here on the YouTube channel as well. There's going to be much more from the other branch of the pod and the website as well, not just the NFL boys as well. There's going to be plenty of college and also Canadian football action for you guys. So, like I say, drop us a subscribe, drop us a like, and head over to the website and, like I say, read all our content. Follow us on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at the Touchdown NFL. It's always going to be Twitter to me. So
I'm never going X. That's never happening, I'm afraid.
I just
think
you've got to say both, haven't you? I don't know. It's kind of weird, but whatever. So drop us a follow. Like I say, drop us a like. Thanks for hanging with us for the past hour or so. It's been really fun to talk about week 2, have a laugh about Bisto, and talk a load of nonsense, really. So, we'll check back and we'll see you again for next week for more fun.